When we hear about North Korea in the news, it's almost always something about military actions, weapons tests, or maybe a parade. Only in the rarest cases do we hear about the country working on big infrastructure projects. So, for example, in 2023, North Korea officially launched its irrigation network, which can carry a large amount of water for agricultural use. Yes, the country does have food shortages. Constant droughts take their toll. The new system of canals and tunnels can help fix the situation, at least partially. However, along with the food supply coming in, the population could suffer a lot. And that's despite people already being unhappy with the amount of water they're getting. All in all, the project is controversial, so we need to figure out what's really going on in the northern part of the Korean peninsula. The first Europeans to set foot in North Korea noted that the country looked like a sea in a raging storm, except here the waves aren't made of water but of stone. North Korea is covered with countless mountain ranges. In fact, they make up 80% of the country's entire territory, and compared to the rest of the Korean peninsula, it's in North Korea where you'll find all the mountains that reach around 6,500 feet and higher. Where can you even grow crops here? There's not much space, but there is some. Still, that doesn't save North Korea, which is one of the most vulnerable countries when it comes to climate change. The country simply can't fully meet its population's food needs. And to top it all off, there are endless droughts. You don't even have to go too far back in history. Just look at how many drought-related problems North Korea's faced since the mid-2010s. In 2017, the UN, deeply concerned about the risk of widespread malnutrition and related issues, allocated $6.3 million in aid to help address shortages of corn, rice, maize, potatoes, and other staple crops. It was the worst drought North Korea had faced since 2001. According to UN estimates, due to decreased rainfall, agricultural production dropped by nearly a third compared to the same period the previous year. Then, in 2019, news broke that North Korea was experiencing its worst drought in 37 years, leaving up to 10 million North Koreans in urgent need of food assistance. Just imagine, people who were already getting little to eat were barely surviving on just 10 ounces of food per day. The cause remained unchanged: lack of rainfall. North Korea's state news agency reported that in the first 5 months of 2019, the country saw only 2 inches of precipitation, the lowest amount since 1982, and that came right after 2018, which had already marked the lowest agricultural yield since 2008. Imagine working in an office or a factory, and then all of a sudden you're sent to dig in the fields. Sounds unbelievable, but only if you don't live in North Korea. That's exactly what happened in 2022 when the country mobilized its entire population to fight drought amid growing fears of a prolonged food shortage. The concerns arose after the meteorological agency recorded that the average temperature in April 2022 was 4.14 degrees Fahrenheit higher than normal, while nationwide rainfall was only 44% of the average level. And that's despite the fact that even before all these changes began, the World Food Program estimated that over 40% of North Korea's 26 million people were undernourished and in need of humanitarian aid. And that wasn't the end of it. In 2023, reports surfaced once again that North Korea was hit by drought. In all but 2 provinces, it was classified as either severe or high. This time, the situation was so dire that, for the first time in the 21st century, North Korea decided to cut rice supplies to its main consumers, the military. There was simply no other option, as some reports estimated the country's food shortage at around 860,000 tons, equivalent to a 2 to 3 month supply. Clearly, North Korea needs to do something about this, and they are. In the first months of 2023, the country imported about 29 million tons of rice from China, much more than the 24 million tons that arrived from China in 2022. But this is definitely not the kind of independence North Korea strives for, so the country is actively working to manage on its own. However, these efforts are already leading to and will continue to lead to worsening living conditions for the population. But let's take it step by step. One of North Korea's projects to address the food shortage caused by drought started in 2012 and was completed in 2020. The largest gravity-fed irrigation system covering over 60 miles and capable of providing enough water to irrigate thousands of acres of farmland. This is how the completed project was described by North Korean state media. It was built in South Hwanghae province, which is just perfect for organizing agriculture. Just take a look at the satellite images. Between the mountain ranges, there's enough land to grow crops, which North Korea has been doing for a long time. With the new irrigation system, the area planted with crops is significantly expanded. Now, practically every available plot of land in the province is planted with something useful. However, the latest news about food shortages due to droughts has emerged in this decade, and the irrigation network was completed in 2020, so it likely didn't provide enough relief. Therefore, the need for additional measures remains. And so, in 2023, the world saw that North Korea was working to fix the situation without putting it off any longer. The North Koreans completed a new irrigation project aimed at improving the fertility of land near South Hwanghae in the counties of Hwangju and Yeotan in the North Hwanghae province. There was plenty of land available for these purposes, but water was still in short supply. It's a good thing the Hwangju River's nearby, providing a water source. However, it's already blocked by a dam, which means a significant portion of the water flow is diverted for other purposes. But that didn't stop North Korea. Just 1 mile from the dam blocking the Hwangju River, another dam was built. This one further reduces the river's water flow for the benefit of the country's agriculture. The diverted water is directed to the very provinces where large areas of land are available for growing rice and many other crops. The reports on the completion of the construction state that to build the new waterway, more than 141 million cubic feet of stone and earth had to be dug up and disposed of, and 4 million cubic feet of concrete were used to construct over 20 tunnels, 500 structures, and irrigation pipes. It was hard and expensive, especially for a poor country like North Korea. However, having a lot of fertile land in the current conditions is crucial. How effective all this will be is unclear, as the project was completed only recently, but one thing is certain. While the population will get more food, they will lose a much more valuable resource, water. You know very well what it means to reduce the amount of water supplied to the population, especially in times of drought. People literally suffer from thirst. Where do they get drinking water from? The same places as for agriculture: artificial reservoirs, rivers, and lakes. The water is, of course, purified, but the source is the same as for agricultural needs. As reported by a researcher from the South Korean Institute for Security and Strategy in 2023, satellite images showed that due to the drought, the water levels in 12 reservoirs across the country had significantly decreased compared to 2022. For example, the Ransong Reservoir, located in Gangwon Province, appears to have lost almost half of the water it had in 2022, according to satellite images. In reality, the situation's even worse. The artificial reservoir had 62% less of this precious resource in 2023. Do you understand how serious the problems will be for the population if, during a drought, the already limited water supply is further diverted for agricultural needs? The people of the province are in for some very serious problems. They'll have to find water elsewhere. For example, on the black market. Yes, in North Korea at certain times, something like this could happen. Some people will have water and others won't. So why wouldn't the first group sell it to the second? That's exactly what happened in 2023. In North Pyongan, people started taking large jugs, walking long distances to springs, coming back and selling the water to those in need at inflated prices, and then they repeated the process over and over again. Yes, people do get water even during a drought. That's a good thing. However, the black market means there's no control, so the water quality could be poor. In that case, health problems can arise, including waterborne infections. However, during a drought, many areas lose even that water, so the reduction in supply from reservoirs is a situation with no way out. All of this happens in a country where there are already problems with the water supply, which affects the population. For example, according to information from 2017, 50% of schools and medical facilities, as well as 38% of kindergartens in North Korea, have no adequate water supply and sanitation. What exists are systems that were built in the 70s or 80s. They don't receive enough investment for maintenance and reconstruction, which leads them to fall into disrepair and remain unrepaired. An important study for understanding the situation was conducted by the Ministry of Urban Management in collaboration with the Central Bureau of Statistics. In their joint report, which covers the period from 2013 to 2014, it was noted that North Korea has low resilience in its pumping water supply systems. Now take a look here. This is also North Korea, as you can tell by Kim Jong-un, who's in a boat. And he's not swimming on some body of water or river, but on land where there should be dry ground. Yes, the country also suffers from flooding, which makes the water situation even worse. This particular flood occurred recently in 2024. That's when Typhoon Gaemi struck the country, causing damage in eastern China, Taiwan, and the Philippines on its way to North Korea. In a short period, North Korea experienced an enormous amount of rainfall, leading to severe flooding in North Pyongan province. The flooding was so intense that 5,000 people were cut off. Moreover, some sources claim that between 1,000 and 1,500 people may have been killed or gone missing. Around 4,100 homes, 7,400 acres of agricultural land, and numerous buildings, as well as regular and railway roads, were flooded. As a result, many people who were already suffering from a lack of water found themselves in a situation where water had essentially become a kind of treasure. Of course, drinking water was brought in, fire trucks came to the flooded areas. However, according to those present there, the efforts were insufficient. This was particularly evident in the fact that many people started collecting rainwater. There was another sign of the severity of the water problem, the emergence of water vendors. They arrived with their barrels and then sold drinking water to anyone who could afford it. Another flood occurred in 2016. This time, a typhoon named Lion Rock struck the country. The Tumen River, flowing near the border with China and Russia, overflowed its banks. It may not sound that serious, but let's turn to the words of a UN representative in North Korea. He described the scale of the events in 2016 as a disaster beyond anything experienced by local officials. This statement was supported by official state media in North Korea, which claimed that the northeastern part of the country experienced the heaviest rainfall since 1945, resulting in the destruction of tens of thousands of buildings, leaving people homeless and suffering from great hardships. Later, approximate figures were provided. At least 525 people were killed, more than 35,000 homes were destroyed, and over 100,000 people were left homeless. Do I even need to mention that the flood completely disabled the water supply system? We didn't talk about the floods just for the sake of it, but to give a better understanding of how severely the water infrastructure in North Korea is affected. Yes, today we've already looked at a project that's being done for the benefit of the country, but will likely have negative consequences for many of the country's residents. But there's another one, which is currently a major achievement for North Korea. In the 1980s, North Korea was a very young country that aimed to strengthen its economy and increase its influence on the world stage. One great way to achieve this is through mega projects. They definitely draw attention. Who among neighbors or even other countries around the world would want to miss out on large-scale construction? Plus, mega projects are often capable of directly or indirectly improving the economy of a region and thus the whole country. This is the Taedong River in South Hwanghae Province. It starts in the Rangram Mountains in the center of the country, flows through Pyongyang, and then empties into the sea 25 miles southwest of the capital, near the city of Nampo. In short, it's a very important river, often called the lifeblood of the capital. However, the river has some unpleasant features. It has a wide mouth which limited trade and transportation between the North Hwanghae and South Pyongan provinces. Additionally, since the Taedong River flows into the ocean, it's subject to tidal influences at its mouth. This significantly affected the agricultural lands in the surrounding areas, and of course the tidal nature of the river also interfered with navigation. We don't need to mention that this is a big problem when the waterway to the capital is obstructed by something. As a result, the North Koreans came up with the idea of building the Nampo Dam. The construction of the dam can be perfectly described in one sentence. This could only happen in a centrally planned economy. Yes, something so colossal would have been challenged by multiple committees. But we're in North Korea, where if resources are available, nothing will stand in the way of realizing the project. Construction of the dam began in 1981. Do you know how many people were involved? 30,000. And all of them were soldiers. The number of civilians is not even mentioned because there were so many soldiers. They dumped 280,000 tons of steel, 1.1 million tons of cement, and millions of cubic feet of gravel and sand into the river. The total cost of the project was about $4 billion, which is an enormous amount for North Korea both then and now. However, this didn't stop the completion of the dam in 1986. It's also worth noting that the construction of the 5-mile-long structure, which involved an enormous amount of resources being dumped into the water, was completed in just 5 years. This would be incredibly difficult today, not to mention back in a time when North Korea was likely not as advanced as it is now. In the end, the dam became a great reminder of North Korea's greatness for the North Koreans themselves. Nampo appeared on banknotes and often served as a backdrop in many state news broadcasts. Neighbors and other countries around the world also turned their attention to the newly built facility in this poor country. In 1994, the ex-president of the United States, Jimmy Carter, even visited the country, and in particular the dam. In short, the objective to increase its influence on the global stage could be marked as accomplished. Such close attention is easy to explain. As we've mentioned, the dam is 5 miles long. It's certainly not a world record, but even today, such a figure attracts attention. For example, the Three Gorges Dam in neighboring China, built nearly 20 years later, is 4 times shorter, just 1.4 miles long. On top of that, Nampo has 36 spillways that can be opened during the rainy season, plus 3 locks for ships and 3 fish passages. In other words, there's no total restriction. Water, ships, and fish can still pass. The dam also literally became a bridge between the 2 riverbanks, which are quite far apart. After construction was completed, residents were able to travel along it from North Hwanghae Province to South Pyongan or vice versa, and not just by car, but also by train. There's a railway running across it. River navigation was also improved. The water level before the dam changed, allowing ships with a deeper draft to pass through. Local agriculture saw a major boost since saltwater stopped flooding the fields and ruining them. Plus, with the dam holding back more water, local North Koreans could irrigate larger areas. Alright, but what about the downsides? The very reason we started talking about this project in the first place. Well, first off, as you've probably figured out, it's a dam. Blocking a river and increasing the water level in a certain section inevitably means the waterway will overflow in some areas. Of course, the North Koreans didn't report any consequences, but critics of the project suggest that a significant amount of farmland was lost. That was hardly good news for North Korea, a country that has long struggled with food shortages. The Taedong River carries small stones, sand, and clay. Before the dam was built, all of this would wash out to sea, and after it started settling at the river's end, leading to silt buildup. Reports say this remains a serious issue to this day. All in all, Nampo is a controversial project, much like the 2023 irrigation plan we discussed earlier. But one thing is clear: North Korea is determined to tackle its problems on its own, even if it comes at a cost to itself.